Welcome, dear friends, and all spiritual seekers and practitioners on the spiritual path, especially practitioners of Bhakti Yoga. Today we continue with the three first instructions on the spiritual path, which are given in the Bhagavad Gita as it is. As you may remember from the previous video, we discussed the second instruction, which was, you are not this body. You are actually a spiritual being. You are a soul. And what was the very first instruction? The very first instruction was, stop speaking nonsense. Because here in this world, everybody has so much to say. But when the test comes, we usually fail. And all these so-called learning and experience and material maturity does not help much. And therefore, it is time that we try and listen to the very, very powerful spiritual instructions from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, which will change our life, transform our life for the better. So in this video, we will discuss about the third instruction, which is tolerate the dualities of happiness and distress. It is very, very practical instruction. So I will explain first scientific explanation from the wisdom scriptures, like Bhagavad Gita as it is. Why do we experience duality of happiness and distress? And second, how can we tolerate it? And why should we tolerate it? So I will just start now with the text from Bhagavad Gita, which is in the very beginning where the spiritual teacher, Krishna, starts giving instructions to his student, his disciple Arjuna. So in the chapter 2, we have text 14. In this text, Krishna says, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress is just like appearance and disappearance of the seasons, like the winter and summer seasons. All these come from the sense perception, O son of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So, and here in the commentary, we can read, there is a description actually about the duality of heat and cold. Like, for example, in the winter time, when it is very, very cold, January and February, it is cold. But a person who is on the spiritual path and who follows the spiritual and religious principles, he will still take a bath. And in India, people take bath in the holy river. And this is very, very cold, especially during Kumbh Mela. Thousands of people come and it is freezing cold and they will all bathe in the river. And then the second example is given in the summertime. In summertime, it can be very, very hot. Nowadays, we can experience all over the world. The temperatures are really high in the summer. So even in the summer, a lady will cook lunch. It's already hot outside, and then she's cooking. And it is even hotter for her. And she will not just stop. She will not just give up this duty. No, she will cook. She will cook lunch for her family. So this is the example of performing one's duties, regardless of the duality of pleasure and pain, happiness and distress. And here we can actually also read in the conclusion of this commentary, one has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of the religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge. Because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya or illusion. So this is very powerful. So what does this mean? If one follows the rules, the proper rules of spiritual conduct, regardless of the external situation, so regardless of whether it's hot or cold, whether it's pleasurable or it's painful, one performs his duty, his spiritual duty, then one will certainly rise to a higher platform, higher spiritual platform, and eventually one will rise above the material platform, above material existence, and attain full spiritual knowledge and full liberation. And even more than that, one will actually attain pure love of God. Of course, if one is on the path of bhakti. So now I would like to give you some examples. And just before I comment, I will also like to give respects to my spiritual teachers. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances to my spiritual teacher who illuminated my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Once upon a time, there was one very learned man whose name was Avanti. Actually, no, he was living in a city by the name Avanti. And as a learned man, he was a member of the society, the portion of the society which is called Brahmanas, or learned man. And therefore, he was called Avanti Brahmana. And he was actually quite wealthy. And he had a family, but unfortunately, he was not willing to spend his money for anything, neither for his spiritual purposes, religious purposes, neither for his family, not even for himself, for his own pleasure. He was just guarding his wealth, just sitting on this wealth and didn't allow anybody to spend it. But because he was also behaving quite unruly, he wasn't nice, he was not kind to his family and friends. They actually did not like him very much, but they were still hoping that somehow or other they will get eventually some of his money. But then what happened? Somehow or other, he lost all his money. Some money was gone through his relatives, somehow or other, they snatched it away. Some money went away through taxes. Some money was stolen away by thieves. Some money he lost because there were bad seasons, so he lost crops. And some money was lost because of natural disasters. And in this way, little by little, he gradually lost all his wealth. And when he lost all his wealth, his family members became really, really upset with him, because before they were still waiting, hoping to get some of his wealth. But now when they saw that he is like a pauper, that he does not have anything anymore, they just threw him out of the house. They threw him out on the street. And when he was lying on the street, being completely rejected, abandoned by his family and friends, he was first feeling really sorry for himself, like really, really bad and really, really sorry. But after some time, a deep detachment awakened in his heart. And he got this realization that actually this was a great blessing for him, because he suddenly realized that the wealth and the money brings just misery, and that actually he is now relieved of this burden. And he also got a very, very deep realization that now he should just completely devote himself to spiritual life to attain the highest purpose of his life. And so he took sannyas, and sannyas is the renounced order of life. So he became a mendicant and just started traveling around. And for his maintenance, he was just begging some food, little food here and there. And now you would think, so nice, the story ends here, right? No. Actually, the real story, the real example that I want to give you is just beginning now. Because many of us think when we start with our spiritual life, when we come to the spiritual path, we think, now I will get some relief. Now all the burdens of the material life, all the trials and tribulations are gone. And now I will just enjoy my peace in my spiritual life. But actually, the reality is not like this. So what happened with Avanti Brahmana? When he was traveling all around, all of a sudden, he attracted really mean people. They came out of nowhere, and they started ridiculing him. They started calling him bad names. They started doing really bad things to him. They would tease him because he took a vow of silence, mauna. So they would tease him so that he would start speaking. And when he wouldn't speak, they would beat him up. When he begged his food and then he sat down to partake of this food, they came by and they urinated on his food, or they just stole it away. And he only had like 1 or 2 possessions, and they would steal it from him and then showed it to him. And when he would ask to get it back, they wouldn't give it to him. And in this way, they were making his life really miserable. So he was really suffering. In the same way, many times it can happen to us when we start with our spiritual path, that life actually becomes more difficult than it was before. And it is not accidental. It is not accidental. This is happening to many, many people, and there is a reason for this. There are several reasons for this. One reason is that there are tests that we have to overcome, that we have to pass in order to be elevated to a higher level on our spiritual advancement. And the other reason is also that we still have so many reactions for bad activities from the past. And although now we might have dedicated our life to the spiritual life, especially to bhakti, some remnants of these results, bad results, are still coming through. And these we just have to tolerate. There is no other way. We can't do anything else but just accept and tolerate. And this is what Avanti Brahmana did. So what did he do? This is very important. Avanti Brahmana had a very, very strong intelligence, and he fixed his intelligence on the supreme absolute truth. And with this fixed intelligence on the supreme absolute truth, he was able to get a higher understanding he was able to understand why he has to suffer all these miseries. And not only this, but he also received the strength, the spiritual strength and ability to tolerate. And he just continued on his spiritual path, undisturbed and undeterred, and achieved his spiritual goal. So in the same way, also you and me, we have to continue on our spiritual path. We have to not be too distressed or disturbed or deterred on our spiritual journey. And I would like to explain to you in little more detail, what is this understanding that Avanti Brahmana had? This is a very secret understanding of the Vedas, and it's very, very powerful. If you understand this topic, you will also be able to tolerate whenever there are dualities of pleasure and pain, happiness and distress coming into your life. So I would like to share with you, actually, these are some verses from this story. The first point here is the same as it was in our previous video about the identification. Everything depends on our identification. And this is the verse that Avanti Brahmana was speaking. Persons who identify with this body, which is simply the product of the material mind, are blinded in their intelligence, thinking in terms of I and mine. Because of their illusion of this is I, but that is someone else, they wander in endless darkness. So when we identify with this material body and material mind, then we come under the control of the mind. The mind really takes over. And this is like 99% of the people in this world are under the control of their minds. Their minds are ruling over them. So what does the mind do when the mind is more powerful than you? Listen on. Failing to conquer this irrepressible enemy, the mind, whose urges are intolerable and who torments the heart, many people are completely bewildered and create useless quarrels with others. Thus they conclude that other people are either their friends, their enemies, or parties indifferent to them. So, when we have this identification with our body and our mind takes over, then the mind puts us into duality, into the illusion of duality. And when we look into the world through this duality, through the vision of duality, then we see some people as our friends, we see other people as our enemies, and we may see also some people as neutral or indifferent. And we become disturbed because we hate the enemies. We love friends, but unfortunately in this world, everything is changing all the time. And so many times our best friends are turning into our worst enemies. Is it so? You probably have this experience also. And this is what Avanti Brahmana realized. He said, no other force besides his own mental confusion makes the soul experience happiness and distress. His perception of friends, neutral parties, and enemies, and the whole material life he builds around this perception are simply created out of ignorance. So this is very, very powerful. It is our own mental confusion that makes us believe that some people are our friends and some people are our enemies. And we start experiencing hatred toward the enemies and so-called love and affection toward our friends. But this is really just the dictation of the mind and our false ego. We are being like puppets, pulled by the strings of the mind and the false ego. And therefore, what is the solution here? Because as long as we are being totally overpowered by the mind, it is extremely difficult to tolerate these onslaughts of happiness, especially distress and the enemies and the hatred. So we have to do one thing, and which this is, we have to take control over the mind. We have to discipline the mind. And when we can discipline the mind, when the mind is disciplined, then this illusion of this perception of duality will also decrease. Now, it depends, of course, on our spiritual advancement, how much we can control our mind. But even if we can control a little bit, we will gain the power to tolerate. We will gain the power to tolerate the adverse circumstances. And we will also get the spiritual strength to not immediately jump up when somebody insults us, when somebody hurts us, when somebody does something bad towards us. We will get the spiritual strength to tolerate. Or, of course, sometimes we have to remove ourselves, but it will help us not to feel excessively disturbed and distressed because of these things. So this is the message of the Avanti Brahmana, and I hope that it was something meaningful for you. And there are many other videos in which you can learn the art of disciplining the mind. You can look under the playlists on the same YouTube channel about the mind and how to control the mind, how to discipline the mind. And I'm really excited to hear from you. So please write some comments, write some questions, and don't forget to subscribe for more exciting videos.